How things turned out after my son's girlfriend revealed she was once a boy. I was in my kitchen chopping vegetables when Sati, my middle son's new girlfriend, started helping with dinner. We made small talk and she mentioned her childhood wrestling days. All evening she'd been incredibly shy, barely speaking to anyone except our dog, often staying hidden behind my son. My other two sons, the oldest and youngest, were always the life of the party during their school years, but my middle son was different. He was focused, academic, and moved out on his own at a young age. He'd also endured an incredibly painful 8-year relationship with an ex-girlfriend who repeatedly cheated on him. He stayed because he loved her, but eventually, the betrayal eroded his confidence and his trust in love. While his brothers teased him for being single, my oldest is married, my youngest engaged. My husband and I knew better. That past relationship had truly scarred him, and they couldn't grasp the depth of his experience. 6 months ago, he finally started dating again. We only just met her yesterday, but I was thrilled he'd found someone. He described her as educated, intelligent, and a fellow nerd with similar interests, which frankly was music to my ears. I'd wanted to meet her right away, but my son explained Sati was extremely shy and needed time. 6 months passed before she felt ready to face the family. That Friday afternoon, my husband decided to fire up the grill, bringing everyone together. My son arrived, hand in hand with his new girlfriend, a beautiful young woman who immediately positioned herself slightly behind him. He hadn't exaggerated. She was incredibly reserved. We all introduced ourselves. We'll call her Sati. She offered quiet greetings to everyone, but truly, our dog seemed to be her most comfortable companion that evening. The boys headed out to help their dad cook, while my daughter-in-law, my grandbaby, and my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, who are best friends, went off to chat. I asked Sati if she'd like to help me with the side dishes, and she politely agreed. As we chatted about how they met and other pleasantries, my middle son slipped into the kitchen. He playfully poked Sati, earning a mock scowl and a light punch to the arm, before he scooped her up in a laughing embrace. "Hey, put her down," I interjected. "Don't be so rough." He complied, gave a quick okay, and headed back outside. "Sorry," I apologized. 3 boys, sometimes they get a little carried away, but he means well. Sati just smiled. "Oh, I know," she replied. "I used to wrestle with my dad and brother when I was growing up." I was surprised. "Your mom let her daughter wrestle her older brother and dad?" I asked. Sati paused, then said, "Well, I used to be a boy, so I guess it was different." She finished with a small giggle. I froze. The knife remained in my hand, my mind scrambling to process Sati's words. My grip tightened on the handle as I stared blankly at the half-sliced carrot on the board. The kitchen's silence was deafening, broken only by the faint sizzle of my husband's grill outside. I sensed Sati shift beside me, no doubt wondering about my sudden stillness. My hand finally moved, bringing the knife down with a sharp crack against the board. "Oh, that must have been fun," I somehow managed to murmur, my brain still fixated on those 5 astonishing words. The knife's rhythm accelerated, turning the carrot into impossibly small circles. Sati, seemingly reassured, relaxed and continued, describing her brother teaching her various holds and her dad refereeing their basement matches. Her voice lightened, and she even laughed, recounting the time she accidentally gave her brother a bloody nose. I nodded, mechanically chopping celery now, forcing myself to concentrate on each slice as she spoke of defeating boys twice her size in middle school. My hands worked on autopilot, while my mind replayed every interaction between her and my son that evening. Her posture behind him, her hushed voice, the delicate way she touched his arm. "Is the corn ready yet?" My husband's booming voice from the back door startled me, and I nearly dropped the knife. The corn, likely overcooked, sat neglected on the stove. My hands trembled slightly as I grabbed the pot handles, splashing hot water onto the counter. "We should probably join everyone," I managed to say to Sati, carrying the heavy pot towards the door. She followed with the bowl of chopped vegetables. As we crossed the patio, words formed on my lips, questions about when she knew or how long ago she transitioned, but I swallowed them, forcing out instead, "So what do you do for work?" She then began to tell me about her job at a downtown tech company. As we placed the food on the table, my oldest son helped his wife with the baby, while my youngest mischievously pilfered meat from the grill, only for his fiancée to swat his hand away. Everyone settled around the picnic table, passing dishes, and I observed their interactions with Sati, acutely aware I was the sole keeper of her secret. The youngest made a joke. Sati offered a polite smile but no genuine laugh. The oldest inquired about her college, and she responded softly, her gaze mostly on her plate. Now every innocent remark about appearance, dating, or the past felt fraught with hidden meaning, tightening my chest. our dog, ever persistent, nudged Sati's leg under the table, begging for scraps. When she finally snuck him a piece of chicken, and he licked her fingers, she let out a genuine, unforced laugh. That authentic sound finally released the tension in my chest, allowing me to take my first full breath since the kitchen. Sati has her master's degree. I blurted out a little too loudly and then couldn't stop. Graduated top of her class, works at that huge tech company. Really impressive. My middle son shot me a curious look from across the table but stayed quiet. She's even traveled to 12 countries. I added, unprompted, feeling my husband gently touch my knee under the table. The meal stretched on, an endless string of me desperately filling every silence with facts about Sati's accomplishments and travels, all gleaned from my son over the past months. Finally, as people began to leave, I practically fled to the kitchen, seeking solace in the dirty dishes. Once the last car departed and silence settled, I stood at the sink washing with my husband drying beside me. The words, heavy and unsaid, finally escaped my lips. Sati used to be a boy. The plate in his hand stopped mid-air. He set it down with deliberate care. His mouth opened, closed, then he picked up the towel again, resuming his task, but slower now. We worked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the running water and the gentle clinking of dishes. The back door opened, and my middle son appeared, searching the kitchen. "Hey Mom, forgot my phone," he said, grabbing it from the counter. As he turned to leave, he paused, looking at me. "You okay? You seemed a little off at dinner." His genuine concern tightened my chest, and I averted my gaze. "Just surprised by something, but I'm fine, really." He walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Sati was so nervous about meeting you all. I know she's quiet, but she really likes you already." The weight of my secret intensified, but I managed a small smile. "She seems wonderful. I'm so happy you found someone who makes you happy." He gave me a quick hug before heading back to Sati waiting in the car. The door clicked shut, and I stood there, dish towel in hand, for a long 30 seconds before I could move. Moments later, my husband returned from outside with the empty grill platter. Seeing my paleness, he asked if I was all right. I reiterated my surprise, adding that all I wanted was our son's happiness. As I steadily dried the last pot, he set down the platter, then wrapped his arms around me from behind. He mentioned our middle son had told him Sati was incredibly nervous to meet us, and wondered if she seemed okay during dinner prep. Guilt slammed into me, a heavy punch to the gut. My stunned reaction in the kitchen had likely made her first family dinner even more challenging. Much later that night, long after my husband fell asleep, I reached for my phone. Transgender etiquette, I typed into Google, scrolling through countless articles on pronouns, appropriate questions, and how to offer support. The glow of the screen illuminated our bedroom as I delved into dead naming, misgendering, and transition timelines, mentally logging all the pitfalls to avoid. My eyes burned from the light, yet I continued, discovering parent support groups and educational resources, bookmarking pages on allyship. It was 2:47 a.m. when I finally set the phone down, but sleep remained elusive. I lay staring at the ceiling fan, my mind racing. I thought of the 8 agonizing years my middle son spent with his deceitful ex, recalling the barely audible whisper in his voice the third time he caught her, the way he blamed himself, his withdrawal from friends, the disappearance of his smile. Now he had Sati, someone who brought laughter back into his life, educated, kind, and clearly adoring. The last thing I wanted was to jeopardize that by saying something foolish or making her feel unwelcome in our family. The following morning, while my husband was in the shower, I called my oldest son. I feigned curiosity about the baby's sleep schedule, but after a few minutes of grandparent talk, I subtly steered the conversation to his company's diversity initiatives, mentioning I'd read about them online. He launched into a 10-minute monologue about his transgender colleague, Marcus, a brilliant and humorous leader of their top development team, beloved by everyone. A wave of profound relief washed over me. His voice held genuine respect, devoid of hesitation or judgment, simply admiration for a valued colleague. When my husband came down for coffee, we sat at the kitchen table, and I recounted everything Sati had revealed, explaining my plan for moving forward. He slowly stirred sugar into his mug, processing it all. Then he reached across, squeezing my hand. He emphasized that our son should dictate who knew and when. We would be a united front, supporting him unconditionally, and following his lead regarding sharing this information with extended family. Later that afternoon, I messaged my middle son, suggesting he and Sati join me for coffee sometime. A smaller, less overwhelming gathering than a full family dinner. The 3 dots appeared and vanished, then reappeared before his reply arrived, brimming with relief and gratitude, proposing a downtown coffee shop for Tuesday morning. 3 days later, I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered my usual latte, and secured a quiet corner table, away from the morning rush. They walked in hand, Sati in a lovely blue sweater that matched her eyes, my son a watchful, protective presence beside her. We exchanged hugs, they ordered their drinks, and we settled at the table. I fidgeted with my cup sleeve. I wanted to apologize for freezing up in the kitchen, I began, looking directly at Sati. She smiled gently, her shoulders visibly relaxing. She said she'd noticed but understood. It was a lot to process and most people needed time. The conversation began to flow more easily, discussing her job and their weekend plans, until my mouth opened and unleashed the absolute worst question. Have you had the surgery? The words hung heavy, and I instantly yearned to vanish under the table. Sati's composure held, but I saw her fingers tighten around her coffee cup. She gracefully pivoted, explaining that she only shares what she's comfortable with, and medical information is private for everyone. My son's hand moved to her knee beneath the table, a small protective gesture that twisted my heart. He then cleared his throat and explained his 6-month delay in introducing them. Sati needed to feel safe meeting parents after her own family had completely rejected her when she came out. The casualness with which he spoke, as if discussing the weather while Sati stared at her coffee cup, shattered my heart. Her own parents, her own family, had cast her aside as if she meant nothing. That evening, my husband took 2 beers to the garage, where our middle son was engrossed in his phone. I watched from the kitchen window as they stood by the workbench. My husband, in his typically understated dad way, asked if his teasing about Sati's quietness at dinner had been all right, wondering if he should tone it down. Our son's entire posture relaxed as he laughed. He appreciated the question, he said, but assured him it was fine. Sati had actually found it funny and felt included, not singled out. My phone buzzed on the counter as I finished washing the coffee mugs from our earlier talk with Sati. The family group chat showed 3 new messages from my youngest, cracking a silly joke about women wrestlers being tougher than men. My chest tightened, knowing he was oblivious to the context. I quickly typed back, reminding everyone to be respectful of people's bodies and their interests. 3 question marks immediately appeared from him, but I stood my ground, adding that jokes about personal interests weren't funny. My oldest son sent a thumbs-up emoji, a small gesture that made me feel less isolated. I waited until my husband was in the shower, then called my oldest son privately. He answered quickly, and I explained that there was sensitive information I couldn't share, but I needed his help setting a more respectful tone within the family. He didn't pry for details, which I deeply appreciated. He simply promised to keep things positive and help shut down any inappropriate comments. An hour later, my phone lit up with a text from my middle son, thanking me for addressing the wrestling jokes in the group chat. He confessed he'd been terrified we would reject Sati once we knew the truth. His message brought tears to my eyes as I typed back, assuring him I loved them both. The next morning, my daughter-in-law arrived for our usual Wednesday visit with the baby. While the little one played with blocks, she quietly pulled me aside, asking how she could help Sati feel more welcome. I shared the basic guidelines I'd learned from my late-night research, using correct pronouns and avoiding personal questions about her body. She nodded, mentally taking notes, as she bounced the baby on her hip. Later that afternoon, folding laundry, my mind kept returning to my son, how he watched us, braced for any sign of cruelty towards Sati. His awful ex had conditioned him over 8 years to anticipate judgment and unkindness. I gripped a towel tighter, making a silent vow to offer unwavering support, no matter what. That evening at dinner, my husband suggested a casual Sunday lunch with just immediate family, purposefully excluding extended relatives or neighbors who might inadvertently say something hurtful. I readily agreed, already mentally planning a simple, stress-free menu. Sunday arrived sooner than anticipated. I spent the morning preparing sandwiches and cutting fruit. Everyone gathered around noon, and we settled at the dining table, conversation flowing easily about work and the baby's new teeth. Then our elderly neighbor knocked, holding a misdelivered package. My husband invited him in, and as his gaze swept the table, it landed on Sati. He made an insensitive comment about real women, not engaging in rough sports like wrestling. My heart hammered. I quickly interjected, asking about his tomato plants. He launched into a lengthy tale about aphids, and I gently steered him back toward the door. Once he finally left, I found Sati on the back patio. I asked if she was all right, and she thanked me for smoothly changing the subject. She confessed that comments like his still stung even after all this time. We sat on the patio chairs, and she began to speak of her own parents. They had completely disowned her 5 years ago when she transitioned. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she explained how chosen family had quite literally saved her life. I reached over, gently squeezing her hand in silence. She squeezed back, and we sat there for a moment before heading back inside. My son met us at the door, his eyes filled with worry, but he visibly relaxed when he saw us both smiling. The rest of lunch proceeded smoothly, with my oldest son expertly keeping the conversation light. Even my youngest asked Sati about her graduate program, showing genuine interest in her research. As they prepared to leave, my middle son gave me an extra long hug, whispering thank you in my ear. That night I couldn't stop thinking about Sati's profound loss, her entire family, simply for being her authentic self. I grabbed my phone again, searching for local support groups for parents of transgender children, hoping to learn from those who had navigated this path longer. The next few days passed peacefully. I observed a lightness in my son. His laughter came more easily, and he no longer appeared tense whenever someone spoke to Sati. My husband also mentioned he'd been reading articles, determined to ensure we were handling everything correctly. We decided on another coffee date just with Sati to check in on her feelings. 3 days later we met at the same coffee shop. I was recounting how my sons used to constantly roughhouse his kids when the words tumbled out before I could stop them. You must have had fun wrestling as a boy with your family. Sati's entire body stiffened, her coffee cup pausing halfway to her mouth. My stomach plummeted. I immediately corrected myself. I mean, when you were younger, not as a boy. I am so sorry for messing up. She carefully set her cup down, saying it was okay, but her hands trembled slightly. My son reached over, taking her hand as I sat there, feeling like the absolute worst person. The remainder of our coffee date was steeped in awkwardness. I overcompensated with forced normalcy, while Sati spoke very little. Once home I drafted a lengthy text to Sati, expressing my deep apologies for my mistake, affirming my commitment to learn and improve. I reread the message for 5 minutes before hitting send. Approximately 10 minutes later her reply buzzed in. First a simple heart emoji, then another message stating, my effort to learn meant everything to her. My eyes welled up as I read it, and I showed my husband, who offered a comforting pat on my shoulder. The next morning my phone rang as I was making breakfast. It was my middle son calling earlier than usual. He confessed he'd been holding his breath throughout our entire coffee date, dreading someone saying the wrong thing. He explained that when I stumbled but immediately corrected myself and apologized, it meant the world to him that I owned my mistake rather than making excuses. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, beginning to draft a simple guide for family gatherings. I listed everyone's names, noting to use she/her for Sati, along with reminders about respecting privacy and avoiding personal questions. My husband peered over my shoulder, suggesting an important addition. No comments about bodies. Later that afternoon my husband called our son, asking for help with the garage door, which had been sticking for months. Our son arrived with his toolbox, and they spent 3 hours working side by side. My husband later shared that they discussed how to protect loved ones without being overbearing or obvious. They solved the door issue and shared a beer afterward, both looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in a while. That evening I took a blank card and wrote Sati a note, detailing all the specific qualities I admired about her. I praised her gentleness with our dog, who typically took ages to warm up to strangers. I highlighted her intelligence, the way her eyes sparkled when she discussed her research. And I shared how much happiness she brought my son, how I'd seen his smile return since they'd been together. I sealed the envelope, leaving it on the counter for her next visit. The next morning my phone buzzed incessantly with family group chat notifications. My youngest was complaining about the new family guide, deeming it unnecessary and rules for talking. My chest tightened as I read his words, but I took a deep breath before replying. I typed that ensuring everyone felt comfortable was paramount, and the guide served as helpful reminders, not rigid rules. His continued complaints about it being too much and why now were quickly followed by a message from my oldest, who supported the guide as a valuable reminder for everyone to be respectful. I put my phone down and called my youngest directly, rather than continuing the group chat debate. He answered with an annoyed tone, questioning the need for a whole guide for family dinners. I explained that making everyone feel welcome was crucial, even if he didn't fully grasp all the reasons yet. I assured him it wasn't a huge ask, simply a request to be mindful of how he spoke, and to ensure no one felt uncomfortable. He grumbled about it being stupid, but eventually conceded he'd follow the guide if it was that important to me. After hanging up, I felt utterly drained from having to rationalize basic kindness. My phone then lit up with a private text from my oldest, promising to help keep things smooth at the next gathering, and to model respectful behavior. He assured me he had my back and would redirect any awkward conversations. Reading his message, I felt a significant burden lift, knowing I wasn't alone in striving to improve our family dynamics. I texted back a heartfelt thank you, expressing how much his support meant. Later that evening, when my son stopped by to return a casserole dish, I asked him what name Sati preferred to use with family. He looked momentarily surprised, then his expression softened. He said Sata was fine, and she hadn't mentioned wanting anything different, but he was truly touched that I'd thought to ask. He hugged me before leaving, telling me I was doing great with everything. That night in bed, I reflected on the considerable effort required to ensure one person felt genuinely safe and welcomed within our family. 3 days later, I met Sati at the coffee shop near the bookstore. I ordered our usual drinks while she secured a corner table. She fidgeted with her coffee sleeve, her gaze fixed on the table, as I attempted polite small talk about the weather. Finally, she looked up, announcing she had something to tell me about her name. She confessed she actually preferred Sophia, with close family, but had been too afraid to correct us initially. A warmth spread through my chest, knowing she trusted me enough to share this. I reached across and squeezed her hand. She smiled, her shoulders relaxing, as I assured her I'd start using Sophia immediately. On my drive home, I repeatedly said Sophia aloud, aiming for it to feel natural the next time I saw her. At home, I informed my husband about the name change as I made lunch. He immediately joined in the practice, casually incorporating Sophia into sentences like, "Pass the salt, Sophia," or "How's your day going, Sophia?" As we ate our sandwiches, we turned it into a little game, weaving her name into random conversations until it flowed effortlessly from our lips. That afternoon, I updated the family guide document on my laptop, meticulously changing Sati to Sophia, throughout and adding a prominent note at the top about using her preferred name going forward. I then sent it to the family group chat with a simple message about the updated information for future gatherings. My oldest son immediately hearted the message. My youngest responded with question marks but offered no argument. I then began planning the big family barbecue for the following weekend, sketching a seating chart on notebook paper. I placed Sophia between my husband and me, where she'd feel protected, and strategically positioned my youngest at the opposite end of the table. I also listed activities like cornhole and volleyball to keep people engaged and moving, minimizing prolonged, potentially awkward sitting and talking. The morning of the barbecue, I rose early to marinate meat and prep side dishes. My oldest son and his wife arrived first to help set up tables and chairs in the backyard. As we arranged everything, I discreetly pulled them aside near the garage, asking for their help in redirecting any potentially awkward conversations. They both nodded. My daughter-in-law confessed she'd been thinking the same thing and would keep a watchful eye. My oldest promised to interject with sports commentary or work anecdotes if the atmosphere grew strange. An hour before guests arrived, I practiced greeting Sophia by name a few more times in the mirror. When their car pulled up, I walked out to meet them, giving Sophia a big hug and clearly articulating her chosen name. She visibly straightened, her smile wider than I'd ever witnessed, while my son silently mouthed thank you behind her back. As more family arrived, I confidently introduced Sophia to each person, deliberately using her name multiple times to ensure everyone heard it. My husband's brother shook her hand warmly, asking about her graduate program, and her eyes lit up. During the volleyball game, my youngest began a remark about girls not being strong enough for certain serves, but my oldest deftly cut him off mid-sentence, loudly asking about last night's football game and that incredible fourth-quarter touchdown. The youngest quickly became sidetracked arguing about the referee's call, and the tense moment passed as I exhaled the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Halfway through the afternoon, the same nosy neighbor reappeared, exhibiting his usual lack of boundaries. He began asking Sophia intrusive questions about her height and whether she played sports in school. I immediately stepped between them, holding a serving platter, and stated firmly, "We don't discuss people's bodies at our gatherings." He looked bewildered, attempting to continue, but I turned my back and asked Sophia to help me bring out more food. She followed me inside, and the moment the door closed, we both burst into laughter. As we sat for dinner, my son rose, beer in hand, at the head of the table. He looked directly at me, raising his glass, and declared, "Thanks, Mom, for everything." His eyes held such profound meaning that I had to blink back tears as everyone else raised their drinks. After dinner, Sophia began discussing her graduate research in molecular biology and her publication plans. My husband engaged her with genuine questions about her lab work, and my oldest son's wife inquired about the application process. Even my youngest seemed interested as Sophia explained how her research might lead to new medicines. Everyone leaned in, captivated, as she grew more animated and confident with each question. She no longer hid behind my son. Instead, she sat tall, using her hands expressively as she spoke. My son watched her, a soft, adoring expression on his face, as she elucidated complex scientific concepts in an understandable way. By the time everyone began to leave, Sophia was hugging people goodbye and even making plans to text my daughter-in-law a book recommendation. That night after cleanup, my husband and I sat on the patio, reflecting on how wonderfully everything had gone. Sophia seemed like a completely different person than at that first shy dinner, he remarked. I wholeheartedly agreed. She was truly blossoming into herself with us. A few days later, during another small dinner, I was talking about taking the boys fishing next weekend when I caught myself, quickly adding Sophia to the invitation. She looked up from her plate with a subtle smile and a nod, while my middle son reached over to squeeze her hand under the table. My husband then cleared his throat and mentioned a big wrestling match on TV next Thursday, asking if Sophia would like to watch it with him and her son. Her entire demeanor shifted. She straightened up, eagerly inquiring about the matchups as my husband pulled out his phone to show her the lineup. They spent the next 10 minutes discussing stats and past matches, while my son watched them, a gentle, loving expression on his face. The following Saturday, with everyone together and looking nice, we decided to take a family photo in the backyard. I began arranging people by height, then paused, asking Sophia where she would like to stand, rather than simply positioning her. She glanced around, then walked directly to my side, linking her arm through mine with my son on her other side. My son caught my eye from his spot, silently mouthing thank you, as the camera timer counted down. After everyone had packed up and left, I found my son loading the dishwasher. I asked him how he truly felt about the evening. He paused, setting down the plate he was scrubbing, and confessed he'd been afraid the entire time that someone would say something hurtful or make Sophia uncomfortable. But, he added, he felt like we had all protected her together. His voice grew thick as he said he never expected us to be so supportive. Later that night, I texted Sophia, thanking her for trusting us with her authentic self, and asking if there was anything more we could do to make her feel welcome. Her reply came within a minute. You're already doing amazing, she wrote, adding that she felt incredibly lucky to have found our family. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text in the family group chat from my youngest son. He apologized for being weird about the pronouns guide and promised to try harder. My oldest son replied with a thumbs up, and my husband sent a heart emoji. I sat at the kitchen table, a profound sense of pride swelling in my chest for all my boys. Over the following month, Sophia began arriving earlier and earlier for family dinners. She'd help me prep vegetables, chatting about her research as we cooked. She and my husband developed a ritual, debating wrestling moves and techniques while setting the table. My middle son would often lean against the counter, watching us all interact, a peaceful serenity on his face that I hadn't witnessed since before his ex shattered him. She even started bringing her own apron to keep at our house and knew instinctively where everything was in the kitchen. At our next large family gathering, I found myself at the sink, washing dishes, watching through the kitchen window. Sophia sat with my daughters-in-law on the patio, all three of them laughing at something on a phone. Our grandbaby crawled at their feet, and Sophia, without hesitation, scooped her up, making silly faces that elicited joyous squeals. My middle son was by the grill with his dad and brothers, all of them relaxed and joking as burger smoke wafted into the air. My youngest called something over to Sophia, and she yelled back a witty retort that sent everyone into laughter. Standing there, hands soapy, watching my family through that window, a profound warmth spread through my chest. We hadn't merely accepted Sophia because it was the right thing to do. We genuinely loved her for exactly who she was, and in turn she had made every single one of us better. She taught us to pause and truly see one another, to inquire rather than assume, to create space for authenticity. My middle son had found someone who helped him heal from years of pain. And we, as a family, had gained a daughter who belonged as if she'd always been here.